expect when we're inspecting. I'm here with Kara Golden. You see her there, right? Wave, Kara. She is going to be handling questions today, so we ask that you go ahead and use the chat button, put in those questions, and we will get to them at our question and answer slide. I'm also here today with Joe DeLaurentis. He is president of Tiger Group and will be doing our presentation today. Joe is a licensed home inspector. He's been with us for 26, 27 years. He holds a supervisory pest control license for wood destroying insects, is a member of the American Society of Home Inspectors, also nationally certified for radon testing. Joe has a background and specialty in new construction and remodeling and extensive knowledge of the latest innovations in construction. In Joe's free time, he manages and trains all of our Tiger staff of 22 inspectors. Before we move on to the presentation, I just want to share a little bit about Tiger Group, and that is, we are a family-owned business. We've been around for since 1992. There's Joe Sr. He started the business back in 1992, and he stands there with Joe Jr. and Kara. We do residential and commercial inspections 7 days a week throughout the state of Connecticut, bordering towns in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and also Westchester and Putnam counties in New York. We keep our office open 7 days a week because we know you are out there as realtors working 7 days a week and want to be available to answer questions and also to schedule those inspections for your clients. All of our inspectors do hold a supervisory and operator's license for wood destroying insects, so we are able to include that report for free with our residential home inspections. And we have an environmental staff. They are all certified to set up those electronic monitors for radon, as well as trained to draw water samples for the environmental water tests. Our mold division is open for mold assessments and testing. And out of our 22 inspectors, some of them do hold specialties such as new construction, equestrian properties, antique homes, and 203K. Before we get started again, I do want to just mention to put those questions in the chat button, and we will be announcing the winner of our Panera gift card raffle at the end. So hopefully you can stay for that. And I'm going to turn this over now to Joe for the presentation.
Thank you, Sue. And in addition to questions, stories, from the field and any other experiences you've had with any of the other related topics, certainly open for discussion as well. So general agenda, I'm going to touch quickly on COVID inspection procedures. It's been, 11 months now, nearly, since we've had to make some changes, and Connecticut Realtor Association did such a great job of getting us all deemed essential. So we'll touch on a little bit of that just for daily practice. And then the basics. What is a home inspection? Who defines it? Use of the Connecticut Standards of Practice. That's where our home inspection licensing is. What does an inspection include? And how can you help your clients, both buyers and sellers, prepare for the home inspection? Touch a little bit on inspection agreements or contracts, and then of course helping your clients to select the appropriate home inspection companies. So the COVID information, from the beginning, the Connecticut Association has had guidelines for us, and the biggest reason for those that continues to be important is making it comfortable for people to be in homes, sellers allowing people for showings, for inspections, etc. Having some guidelines so that we don't have too many people coming in. So participating in the home inspection process, CTR says only the inspector, the principal buyers, and their agent should be present. They also say, of course, like all of us out in society, we should wear a mask or cloth face covering while inside the premises. That doesn't include the exterior, but we kind of gauge that by our clients and their realtors' personal preferences. And then there's a recommendation for wearing gloves inside the properties as well. If you're not already, CTR has a text alert for changes. So hopefully we're changing for the better. Maybe these things will loosen up in the months to come. But that's a great way to track these, or the CTR website. So some of the things we had to do to make changes: we talked to our clients upon initial scheduling about attendance at the inspection, reiterate to them this CTR statement. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but gone are the days where you can bring your extended family, your neighbors, your contractor, and all these other things to that initial inspection. We're suggesting or discussing with clients options if they're not comfortable to remain in a central location, or we can do video consultation, phone calls, at least social distancing during the inspection, so not shoulder to shoulder looking at the furnace and things like it used to be. We do a lot more with credit card payments so that we don't have paper passing hands and those touches and such as well. On site, our inspectors are still diligent about sanitizing themselves, of course, hand washing and their tools as they go from building to building. We provide them all the necessary personal protection equipment. And when requested, we can work with listing agents to wipe down things that we've touched throughout the property. So why does your client need a home inspection? Of course, we want them to have a full understanding of what they are buying, to make an informed decision about that purchase. So we're giving them information about the property, and time again, little things. An example is a couple weeks ago, we came around the back of the house and there was duct tape all across the trim of a window. And the buyer just looked at me and said, "I can't believe I didn't see that. I stood right out here on this patio." You know, they're not there to see that. That's why they hire a professional. And there was really no great consequence with this, but we did some investigation to see if there were, you know, was it just a piece of loose trim or was there some sort of leak issue there? Also, to understand how the systems work, how is the house heated, how old are some of these systems and things like that. Learn about general maintenance. That's not an absolute requirement of our licensing in Connecticut, but it goes a long way to prevent little things from turning into bigger concerns at a property. And of course, planning for future upgrades. I just mentioned the age of some components, particularly the major components. They certainly can be represented as working at the time of the inspection, but the buyers need to know if it's a 30 or 40-year-old heating appliance, and they really ought to be budgeting for some changes to that. Setting those expectations is important. And it is important for us as inspectors, upon meeting clients or talking to them when scheduling, to set some of these expectations. And it's important for you as realtors to work with both buyers and sellers to understand what's going to happen in this process. The biggest thing is understanding that no home is perfect, but that doesn't mean it's not the perfect house for that individual. In other words, we're going to find something. Is it a surprise? Is it concerning? How can they deal with it, or all the things that come with it afterwards? So managing some of these expectations allows for a smoother process. So what is a home inspection? Our definition of a home inspection comes from our license, and our licensing in Connecticut took a lot of those definitions from ASHI. That's the American Society of Home Inspectors. They were the original authors of standards of practice for the industry, and many states took from those in order to create their licensing. Essentially defined as a visual examination of readily accessible areas. The reason those terms are used is there's no expectation in any of the licensing or ASHI standards for us to take things apart other than normal access panels for furnaces, electric panels, and things that are expected to be removed, but we're not taking siding off of a wall and things like that. And they're readily accessible, again, is of course like a furnished house, right? We can't roll up all the throw rugs in a house or move the couch and things in order to see every bit of the house. We are tasked with describing the conditions that exist at the time of the inspection, and it's essentially the whole house. Each of the components is listed, but common terminology is roof to foundation, right? Top to bottom. Regulated by consumer protection, just like your licensing. The beauty of that when we were first licensed in the early 2000s was creating a uniform standard. Before that, there was great variation. You had people that were on site for hours, and the result was an engineering report that was a narrative. It was delivered 7 to 10 days after the inspection and extremely hard to get information from. The antithesis to that was a half a page scribbled on a notebook paper, and someone gave you that on site. So without having the standards, you never really knew what you were getting, and there was great variations in the service and the pricing and such. So it is a benefit to all of us that we were licensed and there's a standard. There's required to give a written report to the client as part of the standards, and those standards are to be given to the client while at the inspection or before. At Tiger, we send those out by email so our clients have an opportunity to review those Connecticut standards. And of course, there's a code of ethics included as well, very similar to your code of ethics that comes along with your licensing. So a licensed home inspector should provide an educational experience, as we spoke about, orienting people with the property in many ways, shutoffs, controls, if they're interested, explaining to them how some of the systems work. The second bullet here is the most important, as our state standards define significantly deficient components. That's really what we're after. What are the majors as they may be? Things that are working normally or not is important. That could be a more simple repair, or could be, in fact, one of these significantly deficient items. And then, of course, the seasonal maintenance tip type things, again, those are really to help people take care of their houses, but also prevent a simple thing like cleaning your gutters from turning into water in your basement. I'm going to run through the components rather quickly. If you have specific questions on any of these, we can address those through questions as well. But of course, we start with the foundation system. That may be a basement in most of our areas, could be crawl space, could be slab construction, general framing. The access points to that are usually in the attic, the basement, or that crawl space. We do have to describe the methods we use to access or inspect those. The biggest reason for that, and the time we use that the most, is when we can't get into something. So there's a crawl space that is too shallow to get into. It's only a foot of clearance, or it's got 6 inches of water in it. So someone should drain that out before we're able to get into a crawl. You have to, according to the licensing, inform your client of that. Hey, I got to most of the basement, but that crawl space in the back is inaccessible today. You need to get the water cleaned out so someone can get in there, as an example. Exterior and roofing. The roof is usually one of the most important questions that a client has when they arrive on site, but we have to look at the wall covering, the related flashing connections between differing materials. Doors and windows, decks and porches are always important on the exterior. Some of the things people don't often think about are grading or vegetation, drainage, all the landscaping type items that can impact the property, and retaining walls. Small garden walls, not such a big deal. Major soil retention type walls can be expensive and important. And then, of course, flat work, walkways, patios, driveways. From the top, the important stuff, the roof covering, the chimneys, how do we get water off the roof in the drainage system, and then of course the ever important skylights and the related flashing for those. Plumbing areas, this is one of the things to set expectations on the seller side. Always important to let them know that a home inspection is rather invasive. Most homeowners are not used to having someone in their house for 2.5, 3 hours and literally going through room by room, running every sink, flushing every toilet, filling the tub. So these are the things to, hopefully your seller is agreeable to allowing the buyers some time with their inspector and leaving the house. In today's world with people like us today, home on Zoom, we have more and more sellers who are maybe home and and some of these items, of course, can seem a little bit invasive to them. So that's one way to set expectations. So as I said, we're going to be running the water throughout the house in order to test the supply plumbing, the drain plumbing. Notice the bottom bullet, we capitalized the word describe because in the state standard, we're only required to describe the well components. So if the property is not on municipal water and there's a well. At Tiger, we do inspect to a minimal degree the well components as part of every home inspection. We also offer an advanced test called the functional flow test, which we'll touch on a little bit later here. But it's important for people to understand whether their well is going to be inspected or not. Electrical, most people think of the fixtures that they use every day inside the house. And yes, we do test as many of those as we can get to in our company. The fourth bullet suggests from the state that there's a minimum requirement of fixtures, and that's one per room. The reason for that is in my opinion, not such that in a vacant house, you're just going to go in and test your one outlet, your one window, and your one light switch. But it's really intended, in my opinion, for those houses that do have a lot of storage in them, or a room that happens to be filled with furniture and maybe some cluttered storage. Then you have to get to at least one. Find a way to get to at least one, and that's the real reason for that. But you will find people that only adhere to the minimal standard. So something to be, your clients to be aware of there. Service entry is important. How does power get to the house and what are those conditions? Of course, on the safety side of things, the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, we will delineate what is on the property, and the closing attorneys will handle that affidavit that's come into play regarding requirements for smoke and carbon. Heating and cooling systems, we inspect and operate any equipment that's up and running and usable. There are limitations. For instance, vacant properties, we don't start systems that don't have fuel in them or have been off for periods of time and such. So this is part of getting the house prepared for sale. One of the things that's excluded from the standard is inspecting flues and chimneys that are not readily accessible. An example of what is readily accessible is looking up from the little clean out door in the basement, looking up a fireplace and looking down a chimney if we're able to get up on the roof, if it's of walkable pitch and there's no snow on it and these kinds of things. One of the other things that's often asked is sizing of equipment, and the standard does speak toward that. Saying that we don't have to size equipment, and that's because there's a lot that goes into telling whether or not that air conditioning or heating appliance is the right size. We need to know the insulation values of the house, accurate square footage and or volume of the house, window U factors, and several other things. So we are in some cases asked by the classic parent that came along at the inspection, oh geez, my air conditioner is a lot bigger than that. How many tons is that? Is that the right size for this house? There should be no expectation that an inspector is going to guess at those kinds of things, and that would require a service company to actually run these calculations. Insulation areas, vapor management, ventilation. The places we can see these are the basement, the attic, and the crawl space. Back to that accessible areas comment from an early slide. We can't open a wall to determine, how much insulation might be in there. Same way as the cathedral ceiling or things like that. Interiors, as I mentioned, we're gonna try to get to all the windows that we can to operate them. And the real exercise here with the windows and the light fixtures and electrical outlets and such is trying to get a feel for a bigger concern. If I have one outlet in a house where I've tested almost 100 outlets, that's bad. It's not such a big deal. It's a maintenance type repair. If 50% of them are miswired, something's going wrong here. Either the homeowner tried to make a whole bunch of repairs or the house wasn't initially wired right. But that's when what we're really looking for as we start to look at these multiple components. In the kitchens, the state considers the appliances beyond the scope of a home inspection. At Tiger, we inspect the installed appliances. So those include the cooking appliances, the oven, cooktop. We operate the dishwasher and run it through a short cycle, and the microwave. Things that we don't include are the laundry equipment, washer, dryer, and the refrigerator. Interior components, fireplaces, I mentioned looking up the fireplace and if possible, reviewing that chimney from the roof. If we can get to it, we include wood stoves, pellet stoves, in the accessible areas of the venting. Good tip for you on the listing side of things, or maybe even the buyers, if there's a gas fireplace on site, be sure that the pilot light is on, if it's not auto ignition, and that the remote is handy. We spend a lot of time with listing agents opening and closing drawers, looking for remotes. You just never know what the hot button is for a buyer, right? That fireplace may be the most important thing to them and they really want to see it turned on. So getting those things tested and not leaving it for, oh, well, we'll check that at the walkthrough. Certainly conceivable, but for some people, it's important to have it checked out. Sue, in her introduction, mentioned the wood destroying insect inspection. Very important to note that the home inspection licensing does not include a wood destroying insect inspection. It's considered beyond the scope of inspection. At Tiger, we include that as part of our inspection fee. We've made a decision a long time ago to have all of our staff licensed to conduct this inspection, train them to conduct this inspection. It fits in well with the structural component, and I am not a proponent of bringing other parties, other companies to the job site. So that way I know that our own staff are the people that are there. We're not waiting for a termite company to come and do that inspection alongside us. We don't have any reason to find anything. In other words, we're not trying to sell treatments. So that's why we've decided to include that for our clients. And it's an important thing for clients to consider when they're comparing services. Home inspectors will explain and direct the client on how to address things. Should it be corrected? Should it be monitored and maintained? Some of these maintenance suggestions may be real simple things to take care of. They may be recurring items on a yearly basis. In some cases, the state allows for recommending further evaluation for things that are beyond the scope of an inspection. And most of those include determining the extent of repairing or does it need replacement. Simple example is a water heater. It's not leaking, but it's not generating hot water. We don't do the diagnosis on that unless it's very simple, right? The switch is turned off or some such. So that would mean, okay, we need a plumber to come out and determine, is there a simple fix here or has that unit gone bad and needs to be replaced? So that's the reason for recommending the further evaluation as directed from the licensing. To get the greatest attendance from this, clients, to get the greatest value, pardon me, attendance is very important. So we like to have our clients there with us so that we can show them and discuss with them what's going on. It's fantastic to know right from the beginning what are their specific concerns about the house. We're planning to finish the basement. We really want to know if there's any signs of prior water entry, or the roof is the most important to us, and things like that. So we can also show them a lot of the positives to the house. In many cases, when a seller represents the things they've done, they might have service records. It's nice to be able to show a buyer all the good things about a house, in addition to, you know, if we happen to find something that needs to be addressed. Questions from anyone?
Hi, Joe. So we just have one question at this time. Back to talking about roofs. Are inspectors supposed to get on the roof to inspect it if they can?
So the state is silent on that in our licensing. I can only speak for our company policy, which is our first effort is to get on the roof, and that becomes difficult based on the height of the edge of the roof or the slope of the roof. And a second effort would be to get a ladder up to the edge or as many edges as you can. I say it that way because some cases where you have a very tall colonial, you might get to 2 or 3 places where you can get to the lower edge, but you may not get to that upper third story roof edge. And the last resort would be use of binoculars or potentially drone in order to get to do that. So I would still expect if there was a first story porch or something on that super high roof or steep roof that you would get up on that section. In my opinion, it's gather as much information as you can. So no, there is no requirement from the state standard for inspectors to get on a roof, and many roofs it's not feasible, safe.
Thank you. How do you handle snow when doing roof inspections and get a comfortable read for the buyer?
Our company has a policy that we offer a free return inspection for anything that's covered by snow on the outside. So the roof is usually people's biggest concern, and part of what I've been doing late yesterday afternoon and today is running around catching up on roofs that were snow covered in recent days. We love communication on these, so when our clients or their representing realtors stay in touch with us about their contract timeframes or when their roof is clear, we expect notification from our client or their realtors to say, hey, please come back, the roof's clear, we have a deadline of such and such date, and then we can all work together to get the information to the clients.
Thank you. And Darlene is asking, why aren't all the appliances inspected? Washer, dryers, refrigerators, for instance?
Yep. So some of those don't stay with the properties, and there's not a lot that we can do to test them. I'll use the laundry as an example. Without a load of clothes, when I first looked into this 20 plus years ago, there's not much I can tell you about that equipment, and we don't know day to day whether the stuff is staying or going. And refrigerators happen to be a little bit of a here today, gone tomorrow. So we found through our years of experience that addressing those appliances that are permanently installed is at least better than the standard and helps our clients out.
Great. Thanks, Joe. That's it for now.
Access at inspection, you talk about setting expectations or preparing for inspection. If you show a buyer a property and you see something like this image in the garage, right? Maybe they listened to their realtor and they decluttered the house, but they filled the entire basement and garage with all this stuff. That's a good time to raise your hand and say, hey, my clients are going to be having a home inspection when we win this contract, and we're going to need some better access here. So heating systems up and running, turned on, gas pilot lights I mentioned to you. Be great if we could get to the perimeters of the basement and garages in order to conduct the structural inspection and the insect inspection. Probably the biggest concern is the fourth bullet, the attic entry. Particularly during COVID, we don't want to be moving people's personal belongings any more than they want us touching their stuff. So that attic entry that's in the middle of the master bedroom closet or wherever in the house that's blocked by shelving and storage and things, it's great if the seller moves that stuff. And again, looks awesome for the buyer. When the path is cleared, they know, hey, I got a seller here who's prepared for the inspection. Crawl spaces, if you know there's a crawl space on the property, be sure that it's not locked. We had a locksmith out about a month ago to a property waiting to get into the crawl space. Nobody could find the key, haven't been down there in years, kind of conversation. And then, of course, apartments, particularly in multifamilies. Do we have tenant awareness? Do we have keys to all the apartments? All little things that tend to make the day go easier. Due to the question, we touched on this already, but in addition to the roofing and other outside components, decks, patios, walkways, and things that we offer the free return for, these three things down at the bottom, the air conditioning is something that we can get about 75% of the inspection done. We can look at the equipment visually We can check the filters. We can get a date for most equipment, and that gives the client a good idea, but we can't turn it on in the wintertime. So great to have service receipts. If you happen to have a listing, getting any documentation of air conditioning, irrigation systems, or pools, it's great to hand that stuff over to a buyer and say, we understand you can't check this stuff in the middle of the winter. Here's the most recent service record to explain that it's working or what they did to fix it or anything else like that. Some of the limitations that are listed in the state licensing standards of practice: destructive probing or dismantling. As I mentioned, if there's a big stain below the second floor bathroom, we are not the personnel that's going to cut that open and see why it's leaking. That would be, again, an example of that further evaluation. Disruption of property or contents. We can't go in and move everything out of the way. Describing hidden defects. We don't know what's behind that stain or what behind other finished materials. Safety is important. Entering unsafe areas. We're in houses 2 a day, so the risks are more. In some cases, I say this because in some cases people say, why aren't you going to walk through that 2 feet of blown insulation across the attic and see what that little spot is? Well, there's not a proper walkway there. Maybe doing that once a year might make some sense to someone, but if we're doing this stuff every day, something's going to go wrong. So future life expectancy, of course, is hard to predict. We can provide some references to clients, but we can't tell exactly when a roof is going to leak or a furnace is going to fail. Top bullet is an important one, and the state specifically references that this is not a code inspection. Put it bluntly, it really couldn't be, right? The code, building code is set up for permitted work, and that includes alterations to an existing building or new construction. There's no way we'd ever sell a house if each house had to be brought up to current code. We do, in fact, talk about safety or building standards and things, but we're blessed in New England to have some beautiful old houses, 1700s, 1800s, whatever it may be, and certainly not applicable to current code. It's not an insurance policy or house warranty. Many of the real estate organizations sell some sort of warranty. That's a completely different beast than a home inspection. Cosmetic condition analysis is referenced from the state, so we're not going to talk about worn out carpets or flooring or things unless they directly relate to a more important problem. And the last one's important too. Piping outside the foundation is excluded, so that's the main waste line or water line to and from the house. General pests, underground oil tanks, all these things are considered beyond the scope of a home inspection. So reporting, I've touched on some of this. I mentioned the wood destroying insect report. That should be a separate document. We happen to use the National Pest Control form so that it's recognizable by lenders, and or if there's a problem, it goes to a pest control operator for treatment. There should be differentiation both verbally in conversation and in the report between what's a maintenance issue and what's a significantly deficient type issue. This will help guide the client as to kind of gauging things as they go through them. There should be a summary at the end to talk about each of these things and go back through the house. What are the significant concerns and what are the maintenance suggestions with things. And some of those might be suggestions for upgrades, right? Your furnace is working fine today. However, it's 25 years old. That's about the expected useful life. So you need to start thinking about replacing that, setting some money aside and such. You will see some relatively different forms. The majority of the reports on the market today are going to be like ours, which is a computer generated report, usually delivered by email in a recognized format. There are a few handwritten reports still out there. That limits you from including things like photos. which our report does, and also has that summary that I mentioned to you. There's no requirement for an agreement or a contract or any sort of list of services. We, in fact, provide our clients with that contract again by email before the inspection, as well as a statement of services. People, whether they've bought or sold homes before, they're not as used to it as we are as inspectors and you as realtors are. You know, do you want a radon test? Do you have a well? Do you want to do water tests? So we find after scheduling, if we put all this stuff in a list and tell them, here's what you've ordered, maybe you have to check with your lender to see if there's any other requirements for tests. And we'll touch on some of those optional tests here in a moment for consideration. Reports are kept confidential. So with our client's permission, we share the reports by copy on email with their representing realtors. Maybe they want it sent to their attorney or some such, but beyond that, the reports are only distributed to those individuals and not sent to anyone else. Here's a quick example of our report. I just grabbed a page of a garage form. We do use a rating system for quick reference, and then a narrative to describe conditions, be it, you know, just noting the type of materials or in fact explaining something which could be some sort of deficiency. So I mentioned the maintenance or upgrade type items. They fall in this second column. The first column are those that are all functioning as they were intended to. And then things get more concerning here with not functioning properly. They may need repairs or replacement. If something needs further evaluation, it falls in this item. And if it was unable to be inspected, I mentioned we have to, by license, explain when we can't get to things. So that's the reason for this not inspected column there. So that's just an example of our reporting system. And you know, this being the garage page, there'll be one for each section of the house, and then what components were included are listed in the left. Moving on to optional environmental tests that I mentioned, probably the most common for people to do is radon and air testing. If there's a well on the property, there's a bunch of well tests listed there, which we will touch on individually. Many of our clients, ever increasing, are looking for mold assessments and testing due to, you know, personal allergies, their children's allergies and things like that. Things that are considered beyond the scope by the state, but some clients may consider calling specialists for are asbestos testing, lead paint, septic systems. Of course, if there is a septic there, I think almost all clients are going to have that checked out. And then underground fuel tank analysis. Radon testing, again, I'm not going to read every bullet to you, but we can address specific concerns on this. We do have an entire 1-hour class on this. It's amazing, as long as radon's been around, there are still a lot of questions and situations that people love to discuss. So should anyone have more interest in that, we can work out running a class on that as well. Effectively, the most important things to understand, the reason why we talk about it being you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, is you have to test in order to understand it. And the EPA has set a guideline of 4.0 picocuries. They do feel that it is a lung cancer causing. EPA testing methods, you may see or have seen some of these in the field. These are different types of testing devices. These are charcoal canisters, Alphatrax, EPERMs. These three are all passive type devices. So they're left on site, they're sent off to a lab, they're read, and you get just one reading per canister. We've made efforts to certify all of our environmental testing staff. They are separate from our home inspectors so that we can keep them trained and certified and specializing. We use these continuous monitors because we get good data from them. So any of these devices is considered to be accurate if it's used according to EPA protocols. But the benefit to the continuous monitor is that you get hourly readings. You're going to get your radon level. temperature levels, barometric pressure levels, and a tamper alarm. So if there's some oddities in that testing, we can leave a device and start a test over or test over a longer period. If the test has been tampered with, we'll know about it. So again, it's about getting more data and qualified results for clients. Should there be a high radon situation, this is the typical radon mitigation system. This is an exterior system, and should the house have the ability to do it, sometimes they can be put inside as well. Newer homes have some radon piping pre-piped for new construction as part of newer codes. Well, water circumstances, radon water is not an EPA guideline. The individual states have created their own, and Connecticut is at 5,000 picocuries. The Northeast is about the highest in the country, and Connecticut itself has an average across the state. We had someone in charge of the environmental radon program years ago who did a study from the labs and came up with an average of 3,000. So the fourth bullet is very important when comparing services. The DPH recommends a dual vial test. So keep that in mind. If you ever have a high radon water test come back, the first thing you want to confirm is that it was not a single vial test. The state says that you should not mitigate unless you've done a second test for confirmation. So important to understand, because when you start to see the costs of mitigation here in these slides, you don't want to do it unless you have good facts with your tests. So the first type of mitigation is granular activated carbon. We call it GAC, and that's the canister that's farthest to the right in this image. This one's not labeled, but hopefully they label them in the field so people will know. Roughly $1,400 to $2,000 range. This handles lower levels of radon in water. In practice around here, it's more like less than 8,000, but some people can use them for 10,000. That canister does have to be changed once a year. For higher levels, and you see the cost go up pretty quickly, this system here is a bubble up system. So we're bubbling the water, taking the radon out in the air and then piping it above the house, just like the radon air systems we saw. And then it goes back into another pump. It's repressurized to put into the house. Hence the high costs there. Basic potability testing includes all of these items. The most important, or those that would make the water not drinkable, are this coliform bacteria at the top and the nitrates. The rest of the stuff is quality of water. It's what we usually take care of with filters or softeners and things like that. I'd say about 75% of our clients that have wells end up doing this potability testing. Some of them get into advanced tests. Maybe the site warrants some of this. I'm buying a house in a subdivision that was an apple orchard, so we might do pesticide sampling. Maybe there's a gas station down the street, or they had an old oil tank problem. They would do VOCs or petroleum type testing. And arsenic and uranium has gained popularity due to reports in the media in Connecticut, and Connecticut Department of Health push for local county health areas and such to do more testing with arsenic and uranium. So we do a fair amount of that along with the basic tests. Early in the presentation, I mentioned to you our functional flow test. So the state, again, does not require in the home inspection itself to inspect the well equipment. We do some of that, but we also offer this functional flow test. It tells the clients about the condition and the performance of the well. First, by running water throughout the house for 15 minutes, that gives us an idea of normal household usage, pressures, running 2 showers at once and such. In an initial look, we're monitoring how the system works, what kind of pressure cycling, what are the conditions of the pressure tank in the basement. And from there, we go outside and with a gauge, monitor pressure and gallons per minute at the hose. So the goal here is to make sure we meet minimums for normal household usage. This test was initially created to satisfy FHA, and many FHA loans still require this test to be done. So our clients need it for lending. We also look at the wellhead. We describe any ages of equipment that we can attain, and of course, visible conditions. If someone has specific concerns, a well company can do a yield or recovery test. And the biggest difference, without getting too far into wells on that, is physically taking the wellhead apart, looking down inside it and measuring how much water do we have before we started, depleting the well, and then figuring out how fast it refills. So a lot more advanced than we want to get involved in with taking things apart, as we don't have a full well repair truck to fix things as you take them apart. Moving on to mold, as I mentioned, has gained a lot of interest and popularity in testing. The first thing to know is that you need a moisture source, and that first bullet there explains that could be anything from a leaky roof to a plumbing issue to water in a basement, but also can be as simple as high humidity. You know, that basement that no one's been in for a year, went through a summer cycle without any dehumidifier and such. That moisture, wherever it comes from, combines with any organic material. That could be the wood framing, the wallboard, wallpaper, to cite some simple examples, carpet, any of these things. The important part of this is not always what you see or can't see, but it's the spores that are released into the air. Those are what impact the people that are visiting or living in the house. So that's why a good mold assessment will include the air quality sampling beyond what you can see. So who needs that? Well, it really depends on people's personal feelings. Do they have sensitivities to mold? Are they in an increased risk group due to some respiratory issues? Do they have specific concerns with the home? My children's play area is going to be the basement. They have some allergies. Or, you know, I smell dampness in the basement. Could that be mold? Things like that. So our mold assessment includes that initial conversation with people. Is it just a general concern, or are there specifics with your family or some such to address? And that may lead towards where we would test or how much testing the client would like us to do. So just to describe our mold assessment, it's a thorough analysis of the exterior and the interior for any active water entry or potential water entry conditions conducive to high humidity and such. That's visual. That also includes use of an infrared camera for any temperature anomalies and a moisture meter to proof out those, are they wet or not. And from there, sampling. The assessment automatically includes the control sample at the exterior, one interior sample, and then any further samples are discussed with the client for their specific needs. We saw something in an attic that they want to do a surface sample on. Maybe their client, again, has specific rooms that they want tested. Here's some easy examples. The top one we keep in our presentation because this was a flip house prepared for sale, and beautiful bathroom above it. But when you got down into the crawl space, they left all this water damaged framing and such underneath it. So again, not directly in the living space yet, but as those spores enter into ductwork and such, and up into the finished spaces of the house. And the lower one is a window, long-term condensation. This was a window that you couldn't get to every day. It was like 6 or 8 feet off the ground, a long history of moisture getting down into the wall cavity, causing some visible mold there. Specialized inspections, I mentioned earlier, getting into some of these. Asbestos essentially is insulation related for what it was used for in our house. That could be this heat pipe insulation that you see in this image, very common to see in some of the older homes, or it could be insulation in the building, such as vermiculite insulation. many times not that easy to see because we've added different forms of insulation over it. It might be covered in blankets of fiberglass or blown in insulation. Should you run into this, there are most likely, I don't want to say for sure, still funds available through this Zonalite Attic Insulation.com. There are funds available to put towards remediation should your clients choose to do that. Lead paint, you all have very well covered in your real estate disclosures. I won't get too far into that, but the keys are age, right? Anything older than 1978. My approach to it is clients should put their money towards maintaining the paint, acknowledge that their house fits the age that it may be there, and use good common sense and practices that the EPA provides on their website for maintaining your home. How do you paint? How do you wipe dust and such and prevent exposure to children? That's the real key. Some houses you deal with may have septic systems, and we touch on this. It's not part of our inspection, but it's important for clients to understand that they need a licensed septic company to come out and inspect their septic. What are they looking for? That guy who's poking around in the yard, he's looking for the tank. There are usually 2 access points, some older tanks just 1, to get into the tank to clean it, to inspect the baffles, which are at each end of the tank. We talk about inspecting the line from the house to the tank to make sure it's not crushed. And then you may have heard the term distribution box, that's leaving the septic tank. And then of course the leaching field is what's underground. So just some of those components that you may have an image in your head now when someone's talking about them. Underground fuel tanks, we do not conduct a search for underground oil tanks according to our state licensing. However, if we see an indicator there may have been one, this is clearly where we're going to recommend some further evaluation, figure out if the tank was removed, get some paperwork to say when and what was done, or maybe do a tank search to find out if there's still a tank present. Question break.
Yes, Joe, we have a couple questions. The first one is about code, but I'll let you answer it anyways. Curious if there's a standard for egress in a fully finished basement, complete with a kitchen, living area, bath, and does it need 2 exits and a minimum sized window?
That's a big, long discussion. So there is, the first question there would be not about current code, but when that space was finished, was there a permit pulled? And that's where you would want to go back to look at that code and see if it satisfied the standards at that time. Currently, you do need 2 forms of egress if it's a bedroom space. So that would mean, you know, you don't need 2 doors per se, but one of those could be a window of appropriate size. And there's a whole chart to figure out the square inch size of a window. In addition to that, it has to be applicable height that one could crawl out it or have a staircase. So if you're going to go up to the window, you have to be able to get up to the window, but then after you get out, you know, you can't jump off into a hole, and you can't crawl up out of a window well without it having stairs in it. So there's very specific requirements for those circumstances.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, those assessments are actually beyond the scope of a home inspection.
Correct. If someone, you know, in circumstances where someone has said to me, will that window satisfy? My answer is the same as I just gave you. The first thing is to go back and find out, was this space permitted when it was finished? Because you'd really like it to be satisfied that existing code for when the work was done, and then it's grandfathered. Someone asked me, you know, I want to know if that window is the right size for current code. I would go home and do some homework for them and just tell them about that specific window. But we're not the permit authority, as they call it, the building code authority, to say whether that space can be used or not.
Great. Do lenders require copies of inspections?
None that I know of.
Okay, just to add, the only part that I'm familiar with is if the termite inspection report is required, obviously, for what could possibly be FHA, VA loans, or some CHFA loans.
Correct. I was thinking home inspection, but you're right, Kara. But the termite is the most common one. And in cases where for somehow, some way, the lender has gotten a hold of the home inspection, I can tell you time and time again, it leads to big problems. So they just want everything to be fixed before they're going to lend on it. So don't.
I think most team leaders and managers say never give the entire inspection report. If I sit through a lot of these presentations, and their advice to their realtors is always, if something is requested, just give that information or that page of the inspection report.
Yeah.
And how often can we do radon testing even after buying?
How often can you? I'd be happy to set one every 2 days for you. But no, how often should you, I guess is what you may have meant. The EPA recommends every 2 years to double check the radon, even if you have a mitigation system in place.
Great, thank you. And if there's an oil tank is still underground, how is that tested?
There are tests to see if it's leaking, so that they test actually around the tank. They'll put a dye in it, and I'm not 100% clear on how all that works, but they then test around the tank to see if it's leaking. We don't see too much going on anymore. The usual course of business is if there's a tank in place, it should come out before closing. Most closing attorneys are going to direct clients that way. And certainly if there's a mortgage on the property, I don't know anybody that's getting loans with oil tanks on property. I should clarify, older steel oil tanks. There are, appropriate tanks today that can be put in, they're double lined and concrete encased and all that, but you don't see that too often.
Great, that's it for now. You can continue.
Okay. So costs, we're going to speak in generality about this, but the best takeaway on cost is let the home inspection companies provide costs. You'll see some variation in the market about how people do their costing, but usually it's size of house, age of house might be a factor, and things like that. Complexity can play into it. Additional buildings, is there a 4-car garage in addition to the attached 2-car garage, and things like that will change pricing. It depends on the size and the age effectively. A good average, at least across our numbers, when you look at a whole year, is the 500 to 700 range. You'll find if people don't include the wood destroying insect like tiger, they may add an additional $75 to $150 to their inspection fee for having a termite inspection done. Radon air, you see ranges there from about 100 to 200 on the higher side. You can see some additional costing there, estimates for things. Preparing, we're part of the team. We want our clients to get information. We want them to be informed and effectively understand what they're buying. We love them to attend with the least amount of distractions as they can, be prepared with their questions, wear comfortable shoes, plan on 2 to 4 hours on site, again, depending on amount of interaction with clients, complexity of the home, and access to things. That's why we have a huge range there. Every day is a different day. You just don't know what you're going to get. Choosing a home inspection company. We keep the term fully in front of licensed and insured for specific reasons. The licensing standards we spoke about throughout this whole presentation, again, come from the Department of Consumer Protection in Connecticut, and there are 2 levels. So we have fully licensed, which requires an inspector to take a course, not unlike your initial real estate course. And then go ahead and we have an internship after that where you have 100 inspections that are supervised. And after you complete that and get it signed off by a licensed inspector, you have to go take the National Home Inspection exam. So some people can run a business for a long period of time under an intern permit and not be fully licensed. So it's important for your clients to clarify who they're working with on that. Of course, I wouldn't be saying that to you if our staff was not fully licensed. And then on insurance, many people gravitate towards the errors and omissions portion of that. There's no requirement in Connecticut for a home inspector to carry any insurance. Again, important to clarify when you want to know who you're working with. Just like any trade, why is this one individual significantly less expensive when he quoted my inspection? Did he include the insect? Does he have insurance? Does he have a full license? In addition to errors and omissions, there's liability insurance. What happens when a ladder is blown off the roof and falls on the seller's car? And then workers' compensation. If employees are on the property, do they have insurance coverage if somebody gets hurt? So this goes for the home inspector, the septic company, anybody that's on site, and important for you as listing agents just as much as buyer's agents as well to remember. We've always had a great client service goals with our company, starting from the scheduling and initial phone calls. Therefore, we have our own office staff. They're in Connecticut, and in our office, 8 to 8 on weekdays, 8 to 6 Saturdays, 4 hours on Sundays. Our schedule request from the website is answered on off hours as well. So we're there for clients for scheduling, for questions, before inspection, after inspection, etc. We offer those environmental tests that I mentioned to you as we went through, and we've touched several times on licensing for wood destroying insects, and we provide that free with our inspection. We follow the standards of practice. Part of the growth that we've had in knowledge of our business has been from learning more and more about what you all deal with as realtors. Helps us to understand our clients and what they're up against. So that has helped us grow throughout the years and improve our reputation, our credentials, and our experiences. We will follow up with you. This is a helpful document for preparing for inspection. You've heard me give you a few tips. If you hadn't written them down, this document shows on the left ways buyers can prepare for the inspection, and on the right, ways that you can help your sellers prepare for the inspection. If anyone is interested in the licensing document, the standards of practice that we've talked about, they're available at the Department of Consumer Protection website, or we can send you copies of that as well. In addition, if you run into situations, we all carry these phones that do everything every day. Take a picture of it, send an email to me, to Kara, to Sue. This is how we develop business relationships, by helping you guys out. So whether or not we have an inspection on the property, I'm happy to help you with those circumstances. Again, my name's Joe DeLaurentis. I'm the president of Tiger, and Kara and Sue are with us as well.
We have one more question, and then I'll let you do our raffle. Are we licensed in Massachusetts? And we are licensed in Massachusetts. We just cover the bordering towns, the Springfield market, basically, in those bordering towns. And Sue, if you'd like to let us know who our raffle winner is today.
It is Darlene. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I will email you to find out if you'd like me to send that to your office or your home for you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Enjoy.
Thank you, everybody, for